5 books and counting. The Tales from the Omni Vault continues to expand as a universe. Go ahead and check the links down in the description to get your copies today.
Looks like this old argument has resurfaced again.
What argument?
Well, every so often I hear people say that if Hollywood is determined to keep remaking movies, they should at least focus on remaking the bad ones instead of the good ones.
Like that'll ever happen. Bad movies don't have a built-in mainstream audience because they're bad. What would be the point of remaking them?
Well, the logic is that if a movie is already good, it can't really be improved upon, so a remake is always going to be inferior. On the other hand, a bad movie might actually have a good idea hidden within there, so if you remake it, there's nowhere to go but up.
See, that makes a huge assumption that the original was already as bad as it could get. If there's one thing either of us have learned from recent years, it's that some people who think they can strike gold will drill right through rock bottom.
Yeah, it always struck me as a questionable idea too. At the very least, I wouldn't call it an absolute, but I've always wanted to put it to the test.
Okay, so why don't you?
You know, that's a good question. And I have just the subjects for study. In order to see if remaking a bad movie can only result in improvement, let's look at an example where a bad movie actually was remade. But of course we need to start with the original. Our example today is the South Korean kaiju epic entitled Yongary, Monster from the Deep.
This is the tale of how a nuclear test interrupts what could have been a steamy honeymoon night. No, really, that's how it starts. An astronaut is called away on his honeymoon night to observe a nuclear test from space. We never learn why it was so important for him to observe this blast, but afterward an earthquake starts, except the epicenter is moving towards the heart of South Korea. One military official recalls the old legend of Yongary, master of the earthquake, and that's exactly what this turns out to be. From the upheaval rises Yongary, a huge fire-breathing dinosaurian monster, and he proceeds to wreck buildings that are in his way, drink copious amounts of oil, and dance to surfer rock.
Anyone who's a connoisseur of cheesy movies and cult classics has likely heard of Yongary. After all, it's one of the first major South Korean movies to see widespread distribution around the world. It also has a reputation for being so bad it's good, and that reputation is not unwarranted.
May as well start with the special effects, since those are the most obvious thing that isn't up to the standards of the day. The effects are realized in the classic method, with a man in a monster suit stomping around a miniature cityscape. I'm sure the most was made of the low budget, but the results still look subpar when compared to what Toho was producing the same year. The buildings look good until Yongary interacts with them, at which point they're shown to be flimsy and hollow. Vehicles, meanwhile, don't quite have enough detail to look like anything other than toys. As for the Yongary suit, well, it looks better than Wang Magui, but the quality never quite reaches above the Gamera films. In fact, you can actually see it falling apart during the assault by the jets towards the end.
Dang, I hope that guy inside was okay. He knew the job was dangerous when he took it, Snazzy.
The movie's campiness only increases on the human side of the story, which barely has anything to it if I'm being honest. The character who gets the most attention is the resident Kenny, here named Icho, who starts as a kind of troublemaker. He also is the only character who develops any sympathy for Yongary, thus furthering the Gamera connection this movie has. This means he begs the adults to stop torturing Yongary and let him die with some dignity at the end, but that's about it. After that, the characters who stand out the most are scientist Il-woo and his girlfriend Su-na. The main reason they stand out is because Il-woo figures out how to kill Yongary, and Su-na is really passive-aggressive towards him throughout the whole thing. Beyond that, the cast really is just there to keep the plot moving.
Of course, the draw of any monster movie is the monster, and Yongary is hard to pin down.
On the one hand, he's got a good, if somewhat derivative design. Clearly the main inspiration is Godzilla with a heavier Stegosaurus influence. In terms of personality, though, he seems to be a simple animal since he spends most of his time just looking for food and retaliating when something attacks him. The only break in this portrayal is that scene where he dances.
I gotta ask, why does this scene exist?
I know they were aiming as much for Gamera as Godzilla, but it doesn't amount to anything here. In the first Gamera movie, sure, the turtle is destructive, but he definitely saves Kenny on purpose, which is part of why he's spared from death at the end. Here, Yongary's dancing makes Icho laugh, but doesn't really change anything by the end.
So what was the point?
I don't know. Maybe they were hoping for a sequel where Yongary came back as a hero. Of course, the movie never got a sequel, so we'll never know for sure.
Well, I think the point has been made. Yongary Monster from the Deep is a bad movie, although it's a charming sort of bad. The whole thing is campy and odd in all the right ways, which makes it enjoyable as an oddity of sorts.
As fun as it can be to bask in the goofiness, though, there's no denying that this is a bad movie through and through. So a remake could only be an improvement, right? Right?
Brothers and sisters of the stars, this is a call for help from Ulalu. As we, the Ulalor, strive to join you in the cosmos, we are plagued by misfortune. The great Torganon threatens our efforts and slaughters our people. If there are any kind souls among the stars, please help us in ridding Ulalu of our enemy.
In the year of our Lord 1998, few movies had as much hype surrounding them as the Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin reinterpretation of Godzilla.
People couldn't stop talking about how big of a deal this movie would be, and after its debut, people couldn't stop talking about how horrible it was. After the back-to-back hits of Stargate and Independence Day, Emmerich and Devlin had dropped the ball and dropped it hard.
Yet that bad reputation did not stop it from spawning imitators, including a remake of Yongary simply entitled Reptilian.
This time around, a photojournalist named Bud arrives on the scene of a major excavation. Here he meets the strangely menacing Dr. Campbell, who is happy to have Bud documenting his amazing discovery, but only so long as he doesn't make a record of the many mysterious deaths that keep happening on site. Such tragedy would detract from the magnitude of Campbell's discovery, the complete fossilized remains of a 500-foot-tall dinosaur. Campbell's former mentor, Dr. Hughes, as well as his former partner, Dr. Holly Davis, try to confront him about stopping the dig, since Hughes has found evidence that the bones are more than they seem. But it's too late. An alien vessel appears above Earth and brings the dead creature back to life. This is Yongary, and he will destroy mankind on the aliens' behalf, unless the humans can find a way to break their control.
There are many things one could say about Reptilian. For starters, it's not nearly as good as Yongary Monster from the Deep.
Wait, I thought you said the first Yongary was bad.
I said what I said, Snazzy.
Yongary Monster from the Deep has plenty of things about it that don't work, but looking back, I can't think of anything it does that left me baffled. Reptilian, on the other hand, has baffling elements out the wazoo.
Take the performances, for example. I think it's pretty clear all the actors knew what kind of movie they were making, but what they do with that knowledge varies greatly.
Some of them are clearly just there to say their lines and get it out as soon as possible, while others ham it up like they're trying to kill Adam West's Batman.
There really is no middle ground. Those are the two extremes we're stuck with.
This leads to weird performances, like how Dr. Campbell acts like a devious supervillain throughout the movie's first quarter. You might think his cruel and conspiratorial behavior is not so subtly hinting at him being in league with the aliens, but nope. He's just an inexplicably evil paleontologist who's so power-hungry that he spontaneously develops a god complex right before getting stepped on by Yongary. No clue why he was like this, but it doesn't matter now that he's Toe Jam.
Other times we think characters are going to be important based on how they're introduced, only for them to turn out not to be.
This blonde soldier, for example. Despite being introduced alongside a male soldier, she gets singled out by the commander as if she's going to be important. She then proceeds to do jack nothing for the rest of the movie, only providing occasional bits of commentary to remind us that she exists. But by the end, everyone is doing that, so big whoop. Then we have this jetpack soldier on the ground who tries really hard to be emotional without fully understanding how, which just makes his performance hilarious. And of course you have the grizzled military veterans played by guys who are clearly wondering what mistakes they made that led their careers to this moment.
I think we get the point, Omni, but you know what the people really want you to talk about.
You mean the thing that's been staring us in the face since this segment began? Yeah, I may as well address the reptilian in the room. The special effects. They're awful.
We have two monsters in this flick. Yongary, whose name is now spelled with two G's for some reason, and Psychor, who serves as Yongary's opponent after the mind control is broken.
I will say this to begin with. I do really like the designs.
Even though this Yongary bears no resemblance to the original, the overall aesthetic works. He has a striking silhouette when viewed from just about every angle, and the various finer details like his three head crests and spiked epaulets make him look somewhat regal. Psychor, meanwhile, is a successful fusion of dinosaur and crustacean, and even has a few aspects to him that make you wonder if he's somehow related to his foe, particularly in the face.
These are interesting designs that demand great execution in the effects department.
Yeah, too bad that didn't happen.
This has got to be some of the worst CGI that I've ever seen. I would compare it to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but the toons in that movie blend better with their live-action backgrounds than these guys do. The digital artifacts only make them more of an eyesore. I get that the budget for this movie was probably low, but there were CGI cartoons released before this movie that look cleaner. I can't even say that it looks deliberately fake like the suits in Monster Seafood Wars.
There's just no getting around it, Omni. These effects suck.
And I can make it even more frustrating with this behind-the-scenes detail.
You see this? This is a picture of the practical Yongary and Psychor. Things like this were used while filming, and then they were replaced with CGI in post-production.
I'm assuming this choice was made because it was the 90s and CGI was the film industry's new favorite tool it loved to overuse. But in this case, it was undeniably a mistake.
In fact, there are a handful of shots throughout the movie where the practical effects were left in, as well as clearly practical shots of buildings being destroyed, and these are the best-looking parts of the movie. I mean, sure, they're on the same level of quality as those two full moon kaiju flicks, but they still look better than the discount reboot animation we're stuck with.
The choice to abandon good-looking practical effects in favor of objectively terrible CGI is a choice I will never understand. Okay, so we've officially debunked the notion that remaking a bad movie can only result in improvement. And if we're being perfectly honest, both Yongary Monster from the Deep and Reptilian are bad movies, though Reptilian is by far the worst one. But does that mean neither of these movies can be enjoyed? Certainly not.
Both movies fall under the banner of so bad it's good. They do things in flagrant disregard for the rules of good filmmaking, and the results are bad in a fascinating way. You don't watch either of them for the high quality. You watch them to poke fun at them MST3K style, and that sort of thing is best done with a group.
The irony is that despite being so cheesy, both movies seem to have carved out their own respective niches in the pop culture landscape. So it looks like they aren't going anywhere for a while.
Alright, so what was the point of this video then?
Well, good question. I suppose the primary takeaway would be that just because something is bad, that doesn't mean it's completely lacking in value, but also that just because the original movie is bad doesn't mean its remake will be better. Just a couple of lessons to be learned from South Korea's most famous monster. You know, aside from the host. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni viewer signing off. Seems one of the fluorescent bulbs above the studio has picked this particular filming to start acting erratic. I hadn't planned that. I should probably get it replaced at some point. But I've already filmed the whole thing, so... oh well.
Thank you all for watching. Now be sure to head down to the description to check us out on other platforms, as well as find links to the 5 current books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.